Okay, everybody, this is the revised chapter 24, the immune system for anatomy and physiology. So let's get going, shall we? Okay, first slide is an overview of the immune system, adenoids, tonsils, thymus gland, shows different clusters of lymph nodes, axillary lymph nodes, inguinal lymph nodes, etc., bone marrow. But let's talk about what is the immune system. So your body has to protect itself. And we have defense systems that are kind of layered to protect us from anything that could possibly get in and hurt us. Okay. So what are those defenses? Our skin, we have chemical barriers, and we have an adaptive immune system. What is immunity? It's the body's ability to recognize and destroy specific pathogens. And a pathogen is any microorganism that can make us sick. Okay. So lymphatic organs, the immune system, what are they? Your red bone marrow, because in your bone marrow is where the cells are made, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Okay. The primary organs of the lymphatic system really are the red bone marrow and the thymus gland. The thymus gland is in the middle of your chest, and that is where T lymphocytes or T cells go to mature. Okay. Then you have lymph nodes, your tonsils, adenoids, and your spleen. They're secondary lymphatic organs, and they have lymphocytes in the spleen and the tonsils and the lymph nodes that have already matured in either the bone marrow or the thymus, and now they're ready to help fight infection. So these are the organs: red bone marrow, thymus, lymph nodes, tonsils, adenoids, and your spleen. And we're going to go through each one. So your bone marrow, that's where the production of erythrocytes, which become red blood cells, grab a hold of some heme or iron and become hemoglobin. Leukocytes, they're your white blood cells, they fight infections. And thrombocytes, also known as platelets, and they're part of the defense system that helps your blood clot. White blood cells defend you against diseases. And with white blood cells, there are 5 kinds and 2 categories. Granulocytes have your neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils. Agranulocytes have monocytes and lymphocytes. And this is all going to make sense, I promise, because each of those types of white blood cells kind of does a different job. Okay. So let's look at the lymphatic system again as an overview. So you have a whole lymphatic system with lymph fluid that flows through vessels. And there are nodes, lymph nodes, that are in clusters in specific areas of the body. If you look at this picture, you see some of the most prominent clusters are in the axilla, right? The axillary area, the armpits. Also in the inguinal area, the groin, right here around the breasts, male and female, and also in the center of the body in the pelvis. But then there's lymph fluid everywhere. You see where lymphatic fluid is flowing all through the body. You also have clusters of lymph nodes that are called cervical lymph nodes that are right here right around the throat and neck. Okay. The lymph fluid basically is like an antimicrobial. So it filters toxins and stuff out of your blood, pathogens, diseases, things that can cause diseases. Your thymus in the middle of your chest, when you're little, it's big, and when you're big, it's little. That's an easy way to remember it. The thymus, when you're little, it's big, and when you're big, it's little. As a child, the thymus gland is pretty large. Okay. Why? Because that's where your T cells, a specific type of lymphocyte, go when they're babies. They go into the thymus to train or mature. And they go there to learn what is yours, like what belongs to you, so that they don't hurt you. Their only job is supposed to be to defend you and protect you from different diseases. Okay. So the T cells go from the red bone marrow into the thymus gland, and they stay there until they're mature, until they're trained. T cells train in the thymus. So the thymus gland is big when you're little and little when you're big, and T cells train in the thymus. Pretty easy to remember. Okay. All right. Next, lymph nodes. Not too much to say about a lymph node. It kind of looks like a bean if you look at it like that. And there are nodules and blood vessels, capillaries, little tiny blood vessels inside of it. So your blood flows in and out of the lymph nodes, and the lymphatic fluid kind of cleanses your blood, if that makes sense. Your tonsils, okay? You have several sets of tonsils, okay? Up inside the roof of your mouth, you have pharyngeal tonsils, which are your adenoids. You have your palatine tonsils, which are on either side of your throat, back by your uvula. They're the ones that can be pesky and can swell up and sometimes have to get removed. And then you have lingual tonsils down low, all the way at the base of the tongue. Okay. And they filter infection. That's what they do too. Then you have your spleen. So your spleen is about the size of a fist. It's actually the biggest lymphatic organ. The spleen filters blood to help destroy microorganisms. It also gets rid of any old or damaged blood cells. It can make white blood cells, and it can store blood cells. It's like a little holding facility. So if something were ever to happen, you got a little reserve, right, stored in your spleen. It's on the upper left side of your abdomen. It's underneath your ribs and right above your stomach. So you can see it here better in the picture. Okay. So when we talk about the immune system, you have 3 lines of defense. The first line of defense are your external barriers. Think of it like Donald Trump's wall. It's your skin and your mucous membranes, okay? Your skin, as long as it's intact, right, won't let anything through it. And it's got kind of this acid mantle that is antibacterial, okay? Your mucus, your tears, and your saliva all contain something called lysosome, which is an antibacterial, can kill bacteria. So that's the first. Those are the external barriers. Also, your eyelashes, cilia in the nose, right? These are all things that block out, prevent things from getting inside you. Okay, these are the external barriers. Then we have nonspecific and specific immunity. So nonspecific immunity is your second line of defense. And basically, it's the immunity that you have from the time you're born. And it involves all different types of mechanisms that protect you using white blood cells, triggering inflammation, triggering fever. It's nonspecific. Anything that gets in that can make you sick, it's going to try to get and kill. Then the third line of defense is your specific immunity. This is when either you've been exposed to a specific pathogen, let's say you had the chicken pox, and your body builds up its own protection against specifically the chicken pox, right? Specific immunity. And we're going to break down each of these as we move on, okay? So your nonspecific defense mechanisms, know these: your skin, your tears. We'll talk about interferon later. Mechanical reactions, coughing, sneezing, get something in your throat, you cough, right? Chemical barriers or normal flora. In other words, your own good bacteria that protects you from bad bacteria. Your neutrophils, monocytes, your white blood cells. Fever and inflammation, you're going to learn, are a good thing because they protect you. Cilia, little bitty hairs in your nose, right? Your ears protect you. Hydrochloric acid in your stomach, that'll kill almost anything. That protects you. Earwax, mucus, vaginal secretions, prostatic fluid, semen, which is the liquid that sperm is carried in. All of those things have antimicrobial properties. Tell me the human body is not amazing. It's amazing. And then even things like vomiting and moving your bowels and peeing, urination, vomiting, defecation, and urination. If you eat bad seafood, you're going to get sick because your body says, we don't want that in here. Throw up, right? So these are all non-specific defense mechanisms that we have from the time we are born. We're born with them, okay? So we talked about that. Let's break down these non-specific immunity systems. So the first one is called phagocytosis. Okay, phagocytes are cells. They're like Pac-Man. If you ever know the game Pac-Man, they ingest. They actually eat up microorganisms. So when a phagocyte is traveling through your blood and sees a microorganism that doesn't belong there, it sends out these projections, these things that stick out of it called pseudopods. The pseudopods then envelop the organism and form a sac around it, like a net, Okay. It's called a phagosome. And then the phagosome goes inside the cell, fuses with a lysosome with digestive enzymes, and actually just destroys that microorganism. And then the phagocyte spits out the waste and it's done. So pretty amazing. That's phagocytosis. There are different types of phagocytes, and the two big ones are neutrophils and macrophages. Neutrophils are the surveillance. They're constantly roaming through your blood, through your body, looking for a problem. Is there a problem here? Is there a problem here? Looking for a pathogen, okay? A pathogen, any microorganism that can make you sick, a bacterium, a virus, a spore, a mold, a fungus, right? So they're roaming, the neutrophils. And if there's an infection somewhere, there's this chemical reaction that happens that releases this chemical, and it's called chemotaxis. So the neutrophils will anchor themselves inside a blood capillary and they dissolve the membrane, squeeze out of the vessel, and get into the inflamed tissue and basically, eat it up. Macrophages, they don't roam the body. They just congregate in specific areas that are most likely to get infected. So where the neutrophils are roaming all through your body, through your blood, macrophages can be found in clusters in the alveolus of the lungs, in your liver, in your bones, and in your spleen. Okay, because that's where they find microorganisms that they have to kill. Your complement system is all about proteins, right? So a bunch of different proteins called complements are circulating through your blood, but they're not really active. So a bacteria or an antibody against the bacteria activates this protein. So a bacteria gets inside of you. The complement, the protein gets activated, and a reaction happens that's a whole cascade of events. Okay. So one thing triggers another, triggers another, triggers another. And it happens where all these complement proteins get released. And the final group that are called the membrane attack complex embed themselves into the bacteria's plasma membrane, punch a hole in it, and then push in fluid and salt, right, into the bacteria until it explodes. True story. So other things it can do, complements can coat pathogens, making them attractive to phagocytes and stimulating inflammation. But I think the membrane attack complex, where they get into the plasma membrane and push in all the fluid and salt and the bacteria explodes. That's pretty awesome. That's just me. Interferons are proteins also. So if a virus infects one of your cell will produce interferon, which is basically it's a signal. Interferon is a signal that's going, hey, there's a virus inside the cell. You want to help out? And this triggers the production of these enzymes that prevent that virus from replicating if it got into the other cells. So that interferon binds to surface receptors on cells around the infected cell and prevents the virus from getting into them. So that's how it prevents the virus from replicating or reproducing or spreading. Pretty amazing stuff. Okay, then we have cellular immunity. Okay, so there are different types of immunity. There's cellular immunity and there's humoral immunity. Cellular immunity will destroy pathogens inside a cell. And there's three classes of T cells in cellular immunity, because cellular immunity is all about your T cells. Cytotoxic T cells, killer Ts, which I love the name. Okay, not natural killers, because that's a type of cell too. But killer T cells, they attack. Helper T cells help, and memory T cells remember whatever the pathogen was that the killer T killed, so that if it comes in again, your body attacks it a little more quickly. Okay. So your natural killers are a different type of cell, right? They're not the same as killer Ts. Natural killers are just their surveillance too. They're roaming through the body, through your bloodstream, and just looking for a problem, looking for foreign cells, looking for virus infected cells, bacteria, also looking for transplanted organs. Because when you get a heart transplant, That's a foreign thing that's put into your body. If we don't suppress your immune system, your natural killer cells will destroy your new heart because it doesn't understand that you need it. So, but we'll talk about host versus graft and immune system with transplants later on. So natural killer cells use a couple different methods to destroy cells, but they're all about these chemicals that cause the cell that's infected to just break apart. The word for cells breaking apart is called lysis. Lysis, cells breaking apart and dying. Okay. And when we talk about inflammation, there's a reason that things get inflamed. Okay. There's a reason. So let's say your skin gets a cut in it. See here, you've got a foreign object piercing the surface of the skin. So when that happens, oops, didn't mean to do that. When that happens, the cells that are injured secrete these chemicals like histamine that dilate all the blood vessels around, which causes hyperemia. It's a lot of blood flow. And the blood flow brings white blood cells, flushes out toxins and stuff like that. So these same chemicals that trigger those expanded blood vessels also cause the cells in the capillary walls to kind of separate. That allows fluid, leukocytes, and plasma proteins, and antibodies, and clotting factors, and complement, all kinds of things to leak through into the tissue that's injured. So you've got this whole army of different things coming to try to help, right? Fibrinogen, clotting factor. It's one of the things that helps your blood clot. So the clotting factors are there to help seal off the area that's open so nothing else can get in, right? So that you don't bleed to death. Neutrophils, which get there because of chemotaxis, because of signals that are sent by that injured tissue, they speed over there and they secrete these chemicals called cytokines. And cytokines are also, they're signals. They send signals to get more neutrophils. We need help. We need help. We need backup, right? And macrophages. Macrophages come in and clean up. They're the cleanup guys because they engulf the damaged cells and the dead neutrophils and everything else. And that's what makes pus purulent drainage. Fun fact. Okay. So inflammation happens for a reason. It sends all these signals out so that every process in your body that has to do with either sealing the area off through clotting or taking care of the area by making sure that it doesn't get infected. That's why the area gets inflamed. Fever. Fever is not a dirty word. It's a good thing. So it promotes the activity of interferon, which is a protein, and inhibits reproduction of bacteria and viruses. So when neutrophils and macrophages see bacteria in the body and they eat it up, they secrete this substance called pyrogen. Pyrogen goes to the hypothalamus to secrete something called PGE. You don't need to know that. Just understand that the hypothalamus controls your temperature of your body. So that resets the body's temperature to go from like 98.6, which is your average body temperature, to go up 101, 102. So when that temperature set point rises, the body generates heat, and it does this by shivering, and the blood vessels constrict. You get cold and clammy skin and the chills. The temperature rises up to the new set point, and it stays there as long as that pathogen is still present. Once the pathogen has been eliminated, the phagocytes stop making the pyrogen, the temperature set point goes back down to normal, you start to sweat, dilates the blood vessels, and boom, you're better. So the fever is cooking, basically, cooking out the bacteria or the virus. Pretty amazing stuff, right? Can't argue with it. Specific immunity is directed at a specific pathogen, and it uses two mechanisms, cellular and humoral. Okay, cellular immunity is about the T cells we talked about, right? The helper T, the memory T, the killer T. Humoral immunity is about the B cells. So, and the B cells don't actually destroy anything, but what the B cells do is they mark that pathogen. So later on, somebody's going to come kill it, like a phagocyte. Okay, so your B cells, okay, begin as stem cells in your red bone marrow, but they stay in your bone marrow until they're mature. Once they're mature, they go into lymphatic organs and tissues. Your T cells also develop from stem cells in your bone marrow, red bone marrow. But before they fully mature, when they're kind of toddlers, they go to the thymus to be trained. And they stay in the thymus until they're adults and fully functional. Once they're adults or immunocompetent, in other words, they can recognize antigens, they leave the thymus and they go to your lymphatic organs and tissues all through your body. Okay. So there you go. Bone marrow makes lymphoblasts, bone marrow maturation, which makes B lymphocytes, memory cells, plasma cells, and antibodies, or the lymphoblasts go to the thymus, T cells, either regulators or effectors, helpers, suppressors, or cytotoxic. This is humoral, this is cellular. I know that was a mouthful. Don't sweat that. Just know that when it comes to humoral, it's the B cells. Cellular, it's the T's. Okay? Okay. So cellular immunity, okay, this is the T cells. The phagocyte ingests an antigen. There's the antigen. That's the bad guy. That's the bacteria. So the phagocyte says, you don't belong here. Out, and it engulfs it. Okay. And then the phagocyte displays fragments of it on the surface of it. It's like, look what I got. Look what I got. And this alerts your immune system that there's a bad guy there. Okay. So when the T cell spots that thing, the foreign antigen, it just sticks to it. And this activates the T cell. The T cell will divide and divide and divide and divide. It'll keep dividing. It clones itself. Tell me that's not amazing. The T cell will clone itself into identical T cells that are already sensitized to that antigen. Some of them become cytotoxic Ts. Some of them become helper cells. The cytotoxic Ts and the helpers kill pathogen. Others become memory cells. So if you ever get exposed to that particular antigen again, they remember and they go, oh, we don't even have to think about this, just kill it. Right? Amazing stuff. So that's your cellular immunity. Humoral immunity, your B cells now, focuses on pathogens that are outside the cell and they don't kill them. They just kind of mark them. They're like, oh, we're going to get you later. Don't worry. Okay. So on the surface of a B cell, there's thousands of receptors for specific antigens, specific bad guys. When one of those antigens comes along that's specific, it actually can't help itself. It just binds to that B cell. The B cell engulfs it and displays the fragments on its surface. Helper T binds to it, right? And that activates the B cell. The B cell reproduces and clones itself just like the T cells did over and over again. Some of them become effector Bs or memory Bs, and some of them become plasma cells. So at any rate, the antibodies stop the antigens by binding to them, preventing them from attaching to one of your cells. They trigger something called agglutination, which is clumping them together. Okay. Makes it easier for your body, for your white blood cells, the phagocytes, to see the bad guys if they're all clumped together. And it promotes proteins like complement proteins to bind onto the bad guys, which sets off that cascade, which destroys the invading organism. The end result of all these things is that the thing that got in you that was going to make you sick is demolished, right? Which is amazing. Okay. So remember, an antigen is a foreign substance or a molecule, a virus, a bacteria, a pathogen, anything that has the potential or the capacity to get in you and make you sick. An antibody is the protein that your body produces specifically against that antigen. Okay? So when we talk about antigens and antibodies, some antibodies that we have are plasma proteins, and they are the IgGs, the immunoglobulins. So there's several, but I want you to know IgG, that's the most common, like 80% of your immunoglobulins are IgG, also called gamma globulin. This is the one that is shared between mom and baby, crosses the placenta. So you have that from birth. And I want you to know IgE. IgE has to do with allergic reactions. Okay, allergic reactions. And that's important. So with this antibody, kind of antibody antigen reaction, They call it a lock and key mechanism. An antibody changes that antigen, that band guy, and makes it harmless, right? It binds to it and it forms this complex where that bacteria or that virus just can't do anything. It's dead, okay? So antibodies kind of look like this, right? The immunoglobulins. They have chains of proteins. They kind of look like a Y or a T sometimes. And anything that triggers an immune response is an antigen. The antibody is what attacks it and deactivates it. Okay, so make sure you know that. Which immunoglobulin protects the fetus before birth? Before birth against antitoxins, viruses, and bacteria? If you said IgG, you'd be right, right? That's the big mamma jamma, the IgG. You also have cytokines. Cytokines are proteins also that are messengers, right? We talked about this earlier, and they are they're the ones that kind of regulate the functions of the lymphocytes and the macrophages when you get infected. They're the ones that call for the backup. Come on, lymphocytes, phagocytes, come here. There's something, there's bad guys, get them, kill them. Okay, that's the cytokines. How do we become immune to things? Different ways that we become immune. So there's active immunity. That's when your body makes its own antibodies or T cells, and that's permanent or at least long lasting. Or passive immunity, which happens when we give you, either by injection or some other way, ready-made antibodies from another person or maybe from an animal. Passive immunity is temporary, okay? Only lasts a few months, okay? Active immunity is permanent or at least long-lasting, right? So it lasts longer than a few months. Let me fix that because that would bother me. Okay. So how does it happen? Let's break it down. You have naturally active immunity. That means that if you get sick with a disease, your body makes antibodies to that disease and you won't get it again. Natural active immunity. You naturally acquired it and it's active, it's long lasting. Artificially acquired active immunity is when your body makes the T cells and antibodies against the disease because we vaccinated you. Okay. We either gave you live or dead or weakened attenuated pathogens to make your body produce those antibodies. Naturally acquired passive immunity, remember temporary, is what happens when a fetus gets antibodies from mom through the placenta or through breastfeeding. They last about 6 months. That's why we start giving the baby its own immunization so it can build up its own immune system. And artificial passive immunity is when you're going to a foreign country where there's an outbreak of something that we don't have here, maybe malaria. So we don't have time to give you an immunization and wait for your body to make those antibodies. So we give you ready-made antibodies that we got from another person. So you're immediately immune, but it only lasts a few months, right? That's used in emergencies, right? So remember, active immunity is long-lasting. Passive immunity is temporary. Naturally acquired, you get sick. Artificially acquired, we give it to you. Naturally acquired here comes mom to baby, right? And artificially acquired, we give it to you. Okay? Easy to remember, I think. And this is just the, reiteration of that. Okay. What is an allergy? An allergy is a hypersensitivity response to a typically benign or harmless substance, right? So if you have a genetic predisposition to something like ragweed, right? So like hay fever in the spring when all the pollen comes out, okay? The first time you're exposed to it, your body will start to make all this IgE specific to ragweed, which binds to these mast cells. You may not have an allergic response or much of one that first time, but now you've become sensitized to ragweed. If you encounter ragweed again, the allergen binds to the antibodies that you already have. When it links two of them together, it causes a release of histamine. Histamine is what makes your eyes swell up and itch and red and water and your nose runny and congestion and hives, pruritus and itchiness, okay? The first time you encounter something, you're sensitized. The second time, you encounter it, that is the first allergic response. Once you know you're allergic to something, you never should go around it again because any exposure after that first one is going to be a worse response. So the first allergic response may just be the runny nose and the watery eyes. The second time, you could have what's called anaphylaxis and go into what's called anaphylactic shock, which happens when the symptoms of anaphylaxis get so bad that your circulation basically stops and sudden death can happen. Anaphylaxis, the tongue will swell and the throat will start to close. Two medications that we use to treat this are diphenhydramine, Benadryl, and epinephrine. EpiPen. Okay, so know those. Okay. And there are 4 types of hypersensitivity or allergic responses. Anaphylaxis, hay fever, allergies. There's cytotoxic responses like a transfusion reaction. Type 3 and type 4 are pretty bad, right? Type 3 is an immune complex like hepatitis B. Don't worry, you don't need to know about type 3. And type 4, I do want you to know about, and that's a delayed hypersensitivity reaction. Okay. And actually, what that means is you may not have a reaction to an allergen immediately. It can happen later. It's completely possible. You could get a blood transfusion and everything is fine. And a few hours later, start to develop an allergic reaction. This can also happen with things like latex allergies and also a reaction to a PPD, which doesn't mean that you have tuberculosis, but that you have a hypersensitivity response to the PPD itself. Okay. Autoimmune reactions or autoimmune disorders. These are the weirdest things in the world. This is where your immune system, instead of doing all the stuff we talked about and killing all the bad stuff, it tries to kill you. So your immune system is attacking you. Why? Idiopathic. We don't know. We don't know why. But there's some kind of a disconnect or a malfunction that occurs. There's so many autoimmune disorders, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, lupus, sarcoidosis, the list goes on and on. And we really don't know. We do know there's a genetic component to autoimmune disorders, but we don't know why. And then there are immunodeficiency disorders. So with autoimmune, crazy amounts of white blood cells trying to kill you. Immunodeficiency, not enough white blood cells to even defend you, right? Think about HIV. That's the prime example that I can use for immunodeficiency. And it's called human immunodeficiency virus. Your immune system is so compromised that it can't save you from infection. And so each of them is equally bad, right? So can the second exposure to an antigen cause a quicker and more dramatic allergic response than the first? I hope you said true, because it can. It can, right? And that's worrisome, right? So if you're allergic to a medication, you make sure you want to have have it recorded. You don't ever want to get that medication again. Effects of aging on the immune system. This is always my favorite part of every lecture. The number of T cells and B cells can decrease. Antibody response gets sluggish, slow. Your lymphatic areas can decrease. Your body temperature is lower, and I'll argue with that's often because of inactivity, okay, and age. Your immune system can't recognize and destroy mutant cells. And there are times with unrecognized infection. If your cardiovascular system can't keep up with the demands of the metabolism, you can actually die. This is why a lot of people died from COVID-19 caused a cytokine storm with so much inflammation in the lungs. If they already were older or obese or had diabetes or hypertension or cardiovascular disease or any other comorbidities, their cardiovascular system, pulmonary system couldn't keep up with it, and they would wind up, passing away. So it wasn't so much the virus itself that killed them, but it was the effect of the cytokine storm. That's what it was called, that happened because of the virus. Okay. And you see that this is crossed through. It says body loses ability to differentiate between self and non-self. So that's talking about autoimmune. Old people don't just wake up with autoimmune diseases. So I got rid of that one. No. Anyway, so I hope you learned some stuff. And I know it's a lot of information to take in, but it's pretty fascinating stuff. All right. See you with the next one. I am out of here. This is Miss Mary saying, see ya. Bye.